Joining us now to discuss it all here in Washington, former UN Ambassador John Bolton and Chuck Rocha, former senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, and from Utah, former Congressman and House Oversight Committee Chair Jason Chaffetz. All right, I'm going to go to you, John, first. What is your take on Trump in Pensacola tonight? I mean, he's on offense. He's like, happy times are here again. Economy's rolling. Where ISIS is on the run. Everybody should be happier. I want to bring both sides together. But there was a classic Trump in rare form here.
Well, he's certainly very energized. For those who say, oh, the burdens of the presidency, doesn't want it, he's looking for a way to get it. I didn't see any of that tonight. And I thought particularly the lines on the economic growth in the country were a good foretaste of what the election campaign is going to look like in November of 2018, that he is delivering, that by removing the cloud of more taxes, more regulation, that economic growth has spurted. And I think we'll go on. And just from my own point of view, when he talks about American sovereignty, it resonates. And it resonates not just with traditional Republicans. It resonates right into the heart of the core Democratic constituency, the blue-collar vote. And that's what won him the election in 2016. And if he can keep that together, he'll keep winning.
Chuck, let's go to you. You work for Bernie Sanders. We're going to play a Sanders soundbite in a moment. But Sanders ran on getting back to the heart of the American worker, the American people. And he kept saying tonight, as he said before, I'm for the working man, I'm for the working people, the forgotten people. And I say on this issue of trade, where Trump says, I want to bring both parties together, there are ways for some Democrats to work with him on these trade deals and the renegotiation of them. And I know everyone says we're not going to work with Trump, but on that issue, I think some of the Sanders supporters could work with Trump. What do you think?
I've been doing campaigns for 27 years, and I grew up in East Texas and went to work in a tire factory when I was 19. The reason I became a Democrat, I started fighting Bill Clinton and the trade agenda because they sent my job to China, where my father worked and 5 of his brothers. It inspired me to get involved in politics. Nobody in my family had gotten involved in politics. You could normally tell by the way I talk that nobody's involved in politics. But it resonates with a group of people that I saw get motivated, who had never been motivated before, traveling on the road with Bernie. And I think that's why you probably saw some of the Bernie Sanders supporters, when it came down to a general election, probably support Trump. The numbers bear that out, right? And tonight, sitting at home, knowing that we were going to talk about this, I watched this speech, and I prepared lots of politicians for speech, and he is at his best when he's in this element. But when you get him out of that element and he gets on Twitter and he gets sidetracked, that's when we take advantage of it. But tonight, he was at his best because that's what he loves doing, is rallying his base.
Jason, a lot of people today are talking about how the Republicans are, they're not going on offense enough. And they're not hitting the Mueller probe, which is filled with all these Democrat partisans. Folks are saying, come on, hit harder on this stuff. The Clinton did that very successfully against Ken Starr and his band of prosecutors. Trump tonight seemed energized. He didn't seem someone who, what were they saying? He's mentally deficient. He has dementia. That's what the whole MSNBC crowd has been saying for months.
Well, I don't know that anybody's even watching those other networks. That bears out in the numbers. But this is Donald Trump at his best. And it is about playing offense. It is about making America great. And he's producing results. And that's what's showing up when he talked about their 401ks. That's when he talked about home ownership in communities that haven't had high home ownership. Employment numbers are doing well. And I do think the president needs to continue to play offense and pound on that wall. I mean, some of the lines that resonated the best is when the president talks about securing our borders, locking down those borders, and building the wall.
And he thinks, John, that Roy Moore, even with the past allegations, as horrible as they are to so many people, he needs that Senate vote. He needs the vote. He needs that support in the Senate for everything he's doing. Yet, could that come back to bite him in 2018 and some of these other close races?
Well, certainly the Democrats are going to try and make it come back. Look, I find a real irony here. The most straight-laced, bigoted, hardline people are all in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, right? These people are so moralistic, they have no tolerance for anybody else. They're all going to vote for Roy Moore next Tuesday, but the open-minded, tolerant, libertarian, cosmopolitan people of the cities, they're absolutely against him. And there's a real inversion here, and I think what it reflects is the support Trump has across the working class vote, not just in the South, but in the North, too. I think people resent the political correctness, and that's what you're saying.
All right, now we're going to play Bernie Sanders from earlier today. He was on CBS this morning. Let's listen.
We have a president of the United States who acknowledged on a tape, widely seen all over this country, that he assaulted women. So I would hope that maybe the president of the United States might pay attention to what's going on and also think about resigning.
Chuck, wasn't that classic Bernie? I mean, we saw Al Franken forced out, allegations that, I mean, if I were Al Franken and I was innocent of those allegations, I would have stayed there and fought it out. And I said on the show with Newt Gingrich, I think it's outrageous that 30 senators can push out someone who was elected by the voters of Minnesota, even though he and I don't agree on anything. But what about this? Trump should resign because of the Billy Bush tape, but the American people elected Trump. They heard that tape. And I was disgusted by it, frankly, but they heard that tape and they elected him anyway. What does that say about what the American people in those key states thought about the old ways of politics that Donald Trump talked about tonight?
I think you're talking about two different things that I agree with partially, is that at a moment in time in politics, anything can happen. Bernie is being Bernie. Bernie's talking to his base. Bernie's doing smart politics. And as an advisor to Bernie, I would always advise him to talk to those people who are frustrated, who may have even voted for Donald Trump, who voted for us in the primary, who now may be feeling disillusioned about one issue or the next.
The economy is doing great.
Right, but does a regular average working man feel that? The stock market went up twice as much under Barack Obama. We didn't talk about that.
I think so, because wages are finally starting to crawl up a little bit.
I will agree with that. We hadn't had real wage growth in 21 years.
Right.
I think that the elections that were held a month ago were another true barometer when the Republicans got their clock cleaned in Virginia. Is another snapshot in time.
Well, Virginia's a Democrat state now. You know that.
But the Republicans had a 17-seat majority in the state house to be such a Democratic seat, so the Republicans must have been doing something there, and they wiped that slate clean. So it's just a moment in time snapshot. So that's what made me think, well, if the economy was doing so well, how did we do so well when the Republicans had such a majority?
One thing, Jason, that I thought was interesting is what President Trump said about what's happened in NATO since he gave that speech urging NATO members to pay their fair share. He was smashed by the elites for having the temerity to actually ask other countries to pay up. This is what he said.
It helps them a hell of a lot more than it helps us, okay? And they should pay. Germany's paying 1%. We're paying 4%. Explain that one to me, right? And Germany has unsustainable cash flow. I read a report. Their cash flow is unsustainable. So I said to Angela, Angela, send a little of that cash flow our way. And she said, but Donald, because we're protecting them. We have 40,000 soldiers in Germany. Nobody even knows that. I said, Angela, let us have some. She said, Donald, the German people wouldn't be happy with that. I said, well, you know what? The American people aren't happy with the way we have it now. Okay?
And at that point, I believe he said, you know, we've gotten like $30 billion more in the dues that have been paid at NATO. For, you know, so we're actually getting more out of this whole arrangement. Jason, I think that is so powerful for people who think, why are we paying? We're paying all the money at the UN. We're not getting equal participation, and we're carrying a lot of the load. We're happy to do it, but people have to pay more. I thought that was a great moment.
It was a great moment. I can tell you, I led a congressional delegation trip, 11 members. We traveled through a number of countries that are allies of the United States. And I'm telling you, to a T, every single one of them led their meetings with us by explaining to 11 members of Congress what they were doing in order to pony up and pay more money, money that they knew was already due. And there is only one reason that happened, and it's because President Donald Trump made it an issue. He said it during the campaign, and he was following it through, and every one of those countries was worried about it because they have to have the United States, the military might of the United States, in order to survive. And it is a better, fairer deal, and it's good for America.
John, I would have to take a bite of that apple because he was trashed for that. He was saying an isolationist, you're not going to do it. And he was going all over the world. He had 12 stops in his Asian tour, 12-day tour, excuse me, China, Vietnam, Korea. I mean, this is not a man who's not afraid to travel, but he just wants to do more bilateral trade deals and have a more honest and open and fair relationship with these countries.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the American foreign policy bureaucracy is very hard-pressed to say anybody ever violates a treaty. Trade treaty, arms control treaty, they do it all the time. And what Trump has said is we're not going to let that go on. That resonates, and he's right about it, too. That's how you get to free trade.